Hey, everybody, welcome to Tip of the Spear again. And as always, we're looking at things in the world that's going on from a biblical perspective and also a prophetic perspective as well. So as you know, we typically interview people, national speakers, nationally known people around the world. And today we're going to have Bill Koenig with us, man. And we are so fortunate and blessed to be able to have him. If you don't know Bill started Koenig's Watch in 1996. He provides weekly summaries of significant Middle East news, so he's like one of the top experts on this stuff. Later, he expanded his coverage with Koenig World Watch Daily on watch.org is his website. And again, he reaches people from all over the country and 35 countries he's in. One of the great things that Bill has on his resume is he was a White House correspondent from 2000 to 2021. So he's got a lot of insight. Bill has authored Israel, the Blessing or the Curse, and has authored Eye to Eye, Facing the Consequences of Dividing Israel. And we're going to talk about Israel today. And Revealed, Obama's Legacy. And so currently Bill writes for Koenig's Eye View, which is a weekly report focusing on biblical relevant world news and White House updates from a current Christian perspective. So it's awesome to have him. And so, Bill, let's welcome Bill to the show. Thank you, Bill, for joining us, man. It is an honor to have you, my friend.
Thanks, Brandon. Great to be with you again in California, then Florida a couple of months ago. So it's great. Great to see you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I got to see you back then, so that was awesome. So, hey, I wanted to tap into your wealth of knowledge because, man, you know a lot that's going on geopolitically. But I want to talk first about what's going on in our American universities and this whole anti-Semitism out of control. These students are preventing Jews from entering the campus, and then we watch these college presidents and administrators do nothing. Bill, what's happening right now from not only a political standpoint, but biblically? What's going on here?
Well, first of all, Brandon, the colleges have been out of control. I remember talking to GOP Republican interns a few years ago in Washington, D.C., right after the 2016 election. And the people that I spoke to, University of Michigan, University of Virginia, University of Minnesota, told me, after I spoke to them, that 70 to 80% of their student body is pro-liberal. We're pro-Hillary Clinton in the election.
Wow.
And as you know, Brandon, you've seen this in California, Florida, Texas, all around the country. They don't want to hear a conservative voice. They do not want to hear us in their campus. I'm curious where they're coming from, and I research it, I follow it, I hear where they're coming from. But they don't want a conservative voice.
Right.
And unfortunately, there's also an anti-Semitic root. I remember Ambassador Friedman, the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Dermer in this case, he briefed us a couple of years ago, and he said the anti-Semitic root of the Holocaust went underground for a few years after the horrific Holocaust, but it's going to resurface. Wow. And this was very prophetic. This was like in 2010, 2012, before he was the ambassador. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing an anti-Semitic root. Yeah. And the other problem, too, is misinformed, uninformed.
Yeah. Right.
And I've done some takes on our Kingdom Come broadcast online, and I've said specifically is a lot of the young people in America know nothing about the Palestinian situation. They know nothing about the corrupt leadership that has led the poor Palestinian people into the situation they have. And if you speak against Hamas, you're dealt with. Yeah. And unfortunately, most of these college students that do protest don't understand anything about, number one, the true situation on the ground, and number two is Israel's biblical right to that land, and that all Israel wants to be is a productive member of the international community and be left alone. They don't care about taking any other country. They want to be productive and live there, as you know, Brandon.
Yeah. Help me out in understanding this. So you got the ignorance of obviously the college students, which I thought you go to college to learn things, right? So these guys go to college and they come out dumber than a box of rocks. But let me ask you this. What's going on with the administration? Because the administration should know better. What's going on with the college presidents that say they cannot condemn these students for asking for a Jewish genocide because they say we have to contextualize it? Or, they take Columbia's quad, basically, and UCLA, and they're preventing Jewish students from entering the area. UCLA, just yesterday and the day before, are preventing Jewish students from entering. And when you listen to administration, people complaining to administration, they say we're not going to do anything. What is that about, Bill?
Well, I remember a couple of months ago, we had the president of Harvard, the president of Yale, and also the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And unbelievable. I mean, the Harvard lady stepped down. I think the Pennsylvania person stepped down. I mean, this was an example of the anti-Semitic roots starting at the top.
Yeah.
In these universities. And that's what we're seeing in Columbia, and that's what we're seeing in other schools. And unfortunately, the professors have had a greater influence. I know when I talk to Christian parents at conferences, they go, our children, our daughter and son grew up in very strong Christian home, a very strong Christian home, a God-fearing home.
Right.
And they go to these universities and they begin to change.
Yeah.
And these professors, these tenured professors, that make a tremendous amount of money for teaching 1 or 2 courses a week, have had an enormous influence on college campuses across America. And this rebellion and this deception is an incredibly significant problem for us that follow Judeo-Christian values that are conservative. And again, Brandon, we are not allowed to speak on campuses.
Yeah.
Conservatives are not welcome. We're invited, and then they take the invitation away. Or we do go, and they have to have incredible security around us in order to speak. And when I say around us, around the conservative voices. So this is what the situation, due to what's happened in Israel, is showing us a lot about the true condition of the college campuses across America. And it's anti-biblical, and it's also a situation where we have Judeo-Christian principles that just aren't welcome. They aren't welcome.
So let me ask you this then, and this is a question I get a lot from Christian parents. Do we pay that kind of money now to send our kids to these colleges and universities? Because look, the anti-Semitism already is a symptom of already other things. They're for gay marriage, they're for the LGBT agenda and trans agenda. What do we tell Christian parents about these colleges and universities? Is it done? Is it over? Are they beyond redemption, these colleges?
Well, it's spiritual warfare, Brandon, as you know it. I mean, this is a spiritual warfare, a battle between good and evil. Yeah. You see the enemy, the demonic influence in many campuses, to the point that truth doesn't matter, or that our truth is relative to the situation. I know a lot of Christian parents just said we can't keep our kids in public schools anymore. We have to pull them out and homeschool or find a Christian school to go to. And it's the same thing with the universities. I mean, there are some universities in the country, some Christian universities and some conservatives, Hillsdale, and then you got Liberty and Regent and others. But there's a small amount of universities. If I had children in college age today, I'd have a small amount to choose from. And it's the same thing that we're seeing in public education. Yeah. And not all parents can pay for the expensive cost of Christian schools. And a lot of them have gone to homeschooling. So it's perplexing. I say this often. I never thought I would live in a day like this.
Can you imagine?
Where we would have a battle for good and evil.
Right.
And those situations you just mentioned. I mean, this is a warfare way beyond anything we ever thought we'd see and expect. And unfortunately, it's a sign of the times.
Yeah. So since you mentioned signs of the times, so say, okay, this anti-Semitism, and we know it's just not just in the college and universities. That's totally unhinged now. But Bill, speak to the fact that we're starting to see it worldwide. It's not just a regional thing, a college thing. And what are the implications if it's worldwide? What are the implications biblically for something like this?
Well, this is, as you know so well, Brandon, I mean, this is final day, the Antichrist spirit, an anti-Semitic spirit.
Yeah.
I feel for our brothers and sisters in Europe. We have such a small Christian base in Europe, and I talk to friends fairly frequent, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's very secular. It's very humanistic. I remember when George Bush was in office, and the Secretary General at that time was named Javier Solana. And Bush was talking a battle between good and evil right after 9/11. And Javier Solana says, we don't really look at things like that. We don't look at good and evil. We look at lack of opportunity, socioeconomic problems. Those are the issues, not a battle between good and evil. And I think that's really what we're dealing with today, a secular humanist that don't understand this as a battle between good and evil. Unfortunately, we're the percentage of the church, the 35% of the U.S. church that understands Genesis to Revelation, and the 27% of our Bible that's prophecy. So we have God's handbook, the Bible, of events that we can watch. And I mean, we're living the final days. I was reading in Amos today. I mean, this is history repeats itself. Yeah. And we're living in that kind of time, the battle between good and evil. Yeah. And it's a level of warfare I've never seen, never experienced. Talked to Jan, our friend Jan Markell, yourself, and others. We're all seeing this battle between good and evil like we've never seen before.
Yeah, it seems to me, Bill, that things kind of are ramping up at an exponential rate. Messiah talked about birth pains. Let me capitalize on what you just said, because I want to come back to what the ICC just did with Netanyahu as far as the idea of charging him as for war crimes and stuff like that. I want to come back to that. But you mentioned the church. What do you think's going on in the church? Because with this Israel issue, and I had you out in Bakersfield at our Israel conference, right? And you did a great job. But it's been about 6 months since October 7th, and I still see a problem in the church where they're completely silent on the issue, Bill. What's happening to the church here in America, or at least church in the West?
Brandon, I emphasize this, that we have 100 million people that attend church in America that do not understand the biblical significance of the state of Israel.
Yeah, good point.
That's Protestants and Catholics that believe that in their teachers, in the Martin Luther, John Wesley, Calvin, the Catholic Church do not understand the biblical significance of the state of Israel. And those men, great theologians, but they believe that Bible prophecy is allegorical, not literal.
Yeah,
and that's a big issue.
Sure.
And worldwide, we have 1 billion people. And unfortunately, a lot of them, the World Council of Churches, the National Council of Churches, are, and unfortunately, some of them have an anti-Semitic root, especially the World Council of Churches. They are calling on Israel to leave the occupied land, the Palestinian land.
Wow.
And that is very significant. Yeah. And I know my wife is from Brazil, but spent 32 years in the Netherlands. Okay. And we're going to be at The Hague on July 3rd and 4th. Presenting a case. We have a venue there. I'll share more with you guys, Brandon, as it all comes together. Okay. But we're going to be there at The Hague.
Wow.
On July 3rd and 4th to counter the criminal courts and to counter the message that this is biblical and also judicial. We can go all the way back to the San Remo Agreement of 1920, 1922, and point that Israel, and this is what Mike Pompeo emphasized when he was Secretary of State, that Israel has a legal right to occupy these communities in Judea and Samaria, a biblical right, and also a legal right that went back to the San Remo Agreement.
Wow.
So this is the battle. It's right in what we have in America is just a level of apathy when it comes to what's taking place. But ironic, even the polls that are coming out, CNN, Harvard, and others, 70 to 80% of Americans, and that includes a lot of people from all different walks of life, believes that Israel should be allowed to complete the problem that they have with Hamas and finish the work. That's significant.
It is significant. Absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out, Bill. So here's what I want you to continue on with that thought. So the Biden administration's in an election year, and you, of all people, know politics like the back of your hand. So why would the Biden administration, knowing that 70, 80% of Americans support Israel taking out Hamas, why would they pander to Islamic views like we're seeing the Biden administration in an election year? What's happening here?
Well, it's the progressive left-wing part of his political party that he is trying to appease.
Okay.
And I'm working on a commentary right now. There was a great article today that says that Biden's re-election is riding on the outcome. And if he fails with a ceasefire agreement, it could be very catastrophic. And John Kirby at the White House said, we don't even want to think about what happens, because if the ceasefire fails and Israel goes into Rafah and completes the work with those 4 remaining battalions of Hamas, this is going to be very costly to him in the left-wing part of his political party. And 8 out of 10 people, 35 and under, are also a key voting bloc for Biden. And a lot of those people do not know what we know when it comes to the true situation in Israel. So he's got a lot riding, ironically. He's got a lot riding on the outcome of this politically. And we will certainly watch this in the next few weeks and next few months, because that's why Blinken was in Saudi Arabia. Secretary of State Blinken was in Saudi Arabia this week trying to pave the way for an Israel-Saudi Arabia normalization agreement. And that's all for political purposes, too, because they've done nothing but made a mess. They left Afghanistan under fire. It's been a disaster in the Middle East. And Biden has nothing to stand for.
So let me pick your political mind, because you have a brilliant political mind. So here's the interesting thing. The overwhelming majority of the Israelis in the nation of Israel support going into Rafah, taking out Hamas, and not having a ceasefire. And of course, Netanyahu says, we're not doing a ceasefire till we get our hostages and we take care of Hamas. We're going to eliminate Hamas. And yet the Biden administration saying, we want a ceasefire. We don't want you going in. We want this to end right now. And yet the United States is the one who supplies the weaponry for Israel. So it seems that we're kind of at a crossroads. Can you speak to that crossroads? Because Israel's like saying, we have an existential threat, and you're telling us to stand down. Where does that put the Biden administration with Netanyahu?
Well, we've seen this, Brandon. I know you have as well. The pressure by the Biden administration on Netanyahu. They just as soon see him leave. They just as soon see his government collapse.
Right.
That was the same thing that happened when Obama was in office. They considered Netanyahu the problem. They even attempted to get his government overthrown.
Yeah.
And then we have Speaker or the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, who's Jewish, that has also spoken of Netanyahu's political departure, as well as Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. So it is fortunate most of the weapons that Israel's needed, the United States has complied. The Jewish community is also a big backer of the Democratic Party. So Biden's kind of walking a tightrope between that support. Yeah. And also the left wing of his political party, the progressive part of his party. And so that's been difficult from that standpoint. But the big thing now is the problem. Israel needs more ammunition. Yeah. And they've got a problem with Hezbollah right now in Iran.
Right.
But the Hezbollah situation, 150,000 rockets, 15,000 missiles in Lebanon and Syria, and then missiles deployed in Yemen and also Iraq. So Israel needs the weapons that they need to have.
Yeah.
And I think with the irony, for the lack of a better word, right now Israel's best friend in Washington is the Republican Party, almost to the vote.
Yeah.
The support of Israel
Yeah.
in the House and the Senate is extraordinarily and almost 100% in favor of
That's
whatever
good.
Israel needs. We're there to support you.
That's good. That's good to hear that. So let me ask you this then. Let's go back to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, coming out saying they're possibly going to file charges against Netanyahu, the IDF leaders like generals, criminalizing them, saying that you guys are starving the Gazans, the Palestinians, and so we're going to charge you with war crimes. Now, they haven't formally done anything, but the fact that they're stating this and that's on the table, where is this coming from? What's going on here with the ICC?
Well, unfortunately, just like at the UN, a majority of the UN Security Council resolutions have been against Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that
Right.
same anti-Semitic root in the criminal court.
Right.
And the Biden administration, I believe the British and others in Europe are saying, don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do this. This will set a bad precedence. And Netanyahu's saying, this is ridiculous. This is absurd. Our country is at war.
Yeah.
We have a very significant risk that we're dealing with. It's our future. It's our survival. And war is war. Mm-hmm. But there's this obsession in the EU, the international community, about penalizing Israel and their leadership.
Yeah.
And even right after the beginning of October 7, Joe Biden said the key to defusing Hamas and Hezbollah is a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. This is absurd.
Yeah.
This is absurd. Iran is funding these guys, Hamas and Hezbollah, and they're committed to the destruction of Israel.
Yeah.
And a Palestinian state from the river to the ocean.
Yeah.
And river to the sea.
That's right.
So I think the criminal court, I think so far they're kind of being quieted by leaders of the international community that are saying this would not be a good idea. Don't do it.
Yeah, I hope they don't. I hope they
don't. Absolutely.
Like Netanyahu said, this would be a travesty, a blight in history if you did something like this. So you mentioned Saudi Arabia and them wanting to they came out, I think, this week, wanting to go back to normalizing relationships with Israel. Can you speak and explain to people, why is Saudi Arabia throwing their hat in the ring saying we want to normalize things with Israel? And even before October 7th, they were getting ready to do something like this. What's the benefit for Saudi Arabia doing this with Israel?
Number one reason is defense.
Okay.
You know, there's 80% of Islam is Sunni.
Right.
20% is Shiite.
Okay.
That's, the Shiites are Iran. They also control Iraq and also Bahrain. And then the Sunnis are the Saudis.
Okay.
And over the years, I've heard from intel people and others that the Saudis actually believe that they'll be the first one that Iran would nuke, before Israel.
Okay.
And I've heard even from businessmen that do business in the Middle East, that the bad blood between the Shiite and Sunnis is so significant that I think a lot of us don't fully understand it.
Wow. Okay.
So the Saudis are concerned about defense.
Yeah.
And the United States is the one that's capable of being there. Yeah. And what's interesting, a couple of years ago, I was at the Israeli government press office, and one of my friends there said, probably the only good thing that came from the Obama nuclear deal is our relationship, Israel's relationship with the Saudis, the Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, and Jordan is so much better because of the Iranian nuclear deal. Obama, they didn't fear him.
Yeah.
and didn't trust him. Our allies
Right.
didn't trust him, and the enemies didn't fear him. It's just like Biden, same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the good thing that came from the Iran nuclear deal is a very close intel and defense relationship. Israel helps the Saudis. Israel helps the Emirates. They give intel to Egypt and Jordan.
Okay.
And so that's a relationship there, Brandon, that's developed.
Okay.
And I think it's number one is defense. That's the number one reason is defense.
Sure. Okay. Interesting enough, Bill, and you know this, Sheba and Dedan are mentioned in the Gog of Magog invasion, and that would be Saudi Arabia, and they kind of sit and watch Israel get attacked, but they're not involved in the attack, obviously. So it's interesting that Saudi Arabia is playing that role right now. It seems to head to the end times. So let me ask you this then. The Biden administration, which is, we know that Biden's not in control. He's got handlers telling him what to do and stuff. But why do you think this continued legacy of the Obama legacy of being pro-Iranian and even pro-Palestinian, how does that help the United States by having a pro-Iranian policy? I mean, we unfroze $10 billion. We unrestricted their oil production, and they've made like $90 billion selling oil to China. Why does it seem like the Biden administration wants a pro-Iranian thing? Because like you said, they're controlling Hezbollah, they're controlling Hamas, and all these the Houthis and whoever. Why would that benefit the United States? Help us out.
Great question. When Obama, and I was in D.C. a couple of weeks ago for a briefing, and we were reminded that the Iranians were up against the ropes, using a boxing term, during Obama's term, and he threw him a lifeline.
Yeah.
He threw him a lifeline. And the Iran nuclear deal was passed, but it should have been voted on as a treaty.
Okay.
And that requires 2/3 vote of Congress. They didn't.
Okay.
They kind of slid it through that way. So, and then released billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So we have Obama 2.0 with Biden in office.
Right.
And, same thing. They were down to $5 billion in foreign reserves. Their economy was tanking. Their government was in a mess. And Biden, according to the briefing, they've received $50 billion plus. When the sanctions were lifted. When the sanctions were lifted, they've received $50 billion plus in new oil revenue, and another 30 to 31 billion that's known of that was released to Iran. So the Biden administration has helped fund this war machine.
Yeah. Right.
So, when I look at this, Brandon, it's just foolish. It's ridiculous. But at the same time, I guess for a prophecy follower, I guess the only good news, it's moving the prophetic ball down the road.
True.
Or kicking the can down the road. We're just moving closer and closer to the Lord's return, because it makes no sense. And
Right.
one other thing, Biden has been known to have been on the wrong side of every significant Middle East decision throughout his history.
Good point.
This is his pattern. Look, ISIS was born through Obama and Biden.
Right.
And this horrible departure from Afghanistan was a total travesty.
Yeah.
And ISIS is a major problem. It's redeveloping inside of Afghanistan, on and on and on. It's just another example of Obama and Biden making bad decisions that affects the world.
Yeah, it really has. It's made even the United States vulnerable, and I think people in the world see our weakness, our weak leadership, because that's where another thing I want to capitalize on. Iran did an unprecedented attack on Israel. This is the first time we've ever seen something like this, and they fired. I can't remember the exact number of how many missiles and things into Israel, and thank God 99% of them were intercepted. But do you think that they would have done this had there been a Trump or some type of stronger leader in the United States? I guess my point is our weak leadership causing these terrorist states, these rogue countries to act now because they know there's no deterrence, basically? Is that what I'm seeing? Is that correct? Or what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. It gets back to enemies don't fear them. Okay. And allies don't trust them.
Good point.
And their judgment. And I think that when you look at the situation. I mean, it's just a fickle foreign policy.
Yeah.
And it's desperate. And, Iran, they're very clever. They're very strategic. They're very patient. They got a plan.
Yeah.
And they played the Biden administration for 3 years where it looked like they were serious about making peace.
Okay.
And in the process, they got 80 billion plus put in their coffers.
Right.
So they're very clever. So I think when you look at just the playing field of the Middle East, I mean, we're looking at Jeremiah 49, 35 through 39, the eventual devastation of Elam.
Right.
Modern day Iran, and likely the area around the Natanz nuclear facility.
Right.
We saw Israeli jets get in and out of there, or pop some missiles in there pretty quick and very effectively a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And then, and also, Brandon, as you talked about a lot, Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Sure.
The alignment of those nations. So that's what's developing. That's what we're watching. We're obviously watching Putin very closely. Erdogan is really, really turning quickly on Israel, even more so than in the past. And so we're seeing these nations take their position.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how the players are all lining up? You got Iran and Russia and Turkey. So since you mentioned that, let's talk a little bit about Russia, because a lot of people are asking me, and I don't really know sometimes what to say, but hey, are we going to just continue to fight an endless war in the Ukraine? And, where's the end game for this? I think we pumped in more money, more billions of dollars into Ukraine. We don't have any accounting where the money's going. And I'm failing to see what the end game is. And so maybe I want to pick your brain. What's going on here? Is this ever going to end?
Well, very interesting scenario. I know that the big bucks, the 60 billion plus, is going to be added to the Ukraine. And what's really disappointing, nothing was done about our border. That was originally part of this whole negotiation, and nothing on it. It's a disgrace.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I remember a couple years ago, there's a group that registers the most corrupt countries in the world. The number one at that time was Somalia, number two was Afghanistan, number three was Iraq, and number four was the Ukraine.
Wow.
And look where U.S. dollars have gone. Three of those four is a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Jews that remain in Ukraine, a lot have left to go to Israel. I think it's 200,000, maybe more than that. We also have a lot of Christians in the Ukraine. So obviously we care for those folks.
Sure.
But that there's a lot of corruption in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And what we heard in Washington is, if we don't give the money to the Ukraine, then Russia's just going to go right in there and then put other NATO countries in Europe at risk. Mm-hmm. And Russia is concerned about NATO. I mean, we've heard over 3-4 weeks ago that actually NATO is the one that's promoting, or even put along with Biden, pushing a potential conflict with Russia.
Yeah.
And I remember the beginning of this 2 years ago, the international media, the United States media, was very much almost provoking the United States to do something with Russia. So it's very precarious. We have Sweden and Finland are now part of NATO, and that infuriated Russia.
Sure.
The bottom line is it's an ebbing and flowing. But through this process of Ukraine, Russia and Israel are closer together. Russia and Iran are closer together than ever before. This has brought them together militarily and otherwise. And a lot of the drones that Russia uses inside of the Ukraine is coming from Iran.
Wow. Because it just seems like it's a meat grinder because the Ukraine is losing its male population to all of this. And you just think, how long can they go? Because they just don't have the military might to push forward. And, are they ever going to get the Donbass area or Crimea back? I don't think so. I don't know. People are wondering how much money we're going to sink into this. And it just seems like it's an endless war. And I think you're right. It's aligning people like Russia and Iran together. So, Bill, let me ask you this. So we got these rogue nations that are capitalizing on weak leadership, but when you have strong leadership, explain for people what that does. Like, for instance, when Trump was in office.
I remember in May of 2017, I was in Israel with Trump, and he had just left Saudi Arabia, and he sat down with all these countries from the Organization of Islamic States. And he said, if you use your weapons and continue to support terror, you will be an enemy of the United States. But if you don't, you will be an ally of the United States, and we will be a great friend. And I had a friend that was with Al Arabiya, who was a Maronite Catholic, and Pierre said to me right about that time, he was not a Trump backer. He said, Bill, I can't believe how popular Trump is in the Middle East. They love him. They love him. And that was right after that message. Right after that message he gave in Riyadh to the Organization of Islamic States. They love strength. And Trump let it be known in the Middle East. I mean, Soleimani was taken out in January of 2020.
Yes, good point.
From Iran, al-Baghdadi was taken out.
Right.
And we had no wars in the Middle East. And there was order. And what a contrast. And the same thing with the Ukraine. And a lot of people doubt that Russia would have made the move with President Trump in office.
Excellent point, because even Trump, I remember, had Rocket Man under control in North Korea.
Exactly.
And I was listening, interesting enough, to this guy. I can't remember his name, but he's called the son of Hamas. He's the son of one of the Hamas leaders, and he's been going around doing interviews. And he even mentioned, Bill, that even in the Muslim world, that when they look at Biden, appeasement to them is weakness. But when they looked at Trump, they saw strength and unpredictability, and they at least respected that. So just to what you said, the son of Hamas even said that. And so let me ask you this, going with Putin. Now, do you think Putin would have done what he did to the Ukraine had Trump been in there, or a strong leader been in there?
Very doubtful, and if so, it would have been so much different than what we've seen for the last 2 years. Very likely not, Brandon, but if he did, it would have been a whole different scenario. It wouldn't be so bullish, and it wouldn't have been so aggressive.
True. So, hey, since we're talking about Putin and we're talking about the Gog and Magog alliance and stuff like that, it was interesting the other day. I was listening to an interview of Alexander Dugin. Now, Alexander Dugin is like the philosopher, political guy that has the ear of Putin. And, he's philosophizing that Russia's going to establish its greatness and, be the world leader. And obviously Dugin and Putin, they hate the West. They hate liberalism. They even hate globalism, believe it or not, but they're about establishing Russian dominancy and the old ways. Now, interesting enough, how does that play into possibly, these end time scenario with the Gog of Magog invasion, with Russia saying we want to reestablish dominance in the world? How does that play in Ezekiel?
Well, that's a big factor. When you look at Ezekiel, the three key countries there, Turkey, Russia, and Iran. And Erdogan is doing things now that are making a lot of people very, very worried and concerned. That it just totally, he kind of started making amends with Israel for the purpose of business or whatever else. And then after October 7th, he's been a big backer of Hamas for a long time in the Muslim Brotherhood. And the things he's been saying, even in my news report last week, there's like 7 or 8 things he's doing right now. And then today, he's talking about stopping any trade between Israel and Turkey.
Really?
And
wow.
Before Erdogan, the Turkey and Israeli military exercised together. They had a very, very good relationship.
Okay.
The generals of Turkey, the generals of Israel. And then when Erdogan took over, he got rid of a lot of those generals, pushed them out of office, or pushed them out of their positions. And then also there's been a tremendous amount of tourism between Israel and going to Turkey. And also a tremendous amount of business. I mean, the Turks are very entrepreneurial. So there's been a lot of business done between Turkey and Israel. So this implication of what he said today, that's not only going to hurt Israel, but it's also going to hurt Turkish business people.
Sure.
Israel said, well, we'll make it up somewhere else. And that's true. But again, I think that the strong man in this relationship right now of the Gog-Magog force is obviously Putin and Erdogan. Right.
So with the time remaining, we're coming to the end here, but I got about a couple minutes. As Christians, what should we be looking for in this year and the years ahead? What are things coming down the pipe that we need to be aware of, Bill, that you're watching develop and could be upon us soon?
The most divisive political election in our history. You know, we hear every 4 years that this is the most important presidential election we've ever had.
Yeah.
We're watching what they're attempting to do with Trump. Mm-hmm. Trump was a good president in many ways. They were after him from the day that he declared his candidacy for president. Yeah. Obviously, there's some things that bother us and concern us, but for the most part, he's been a very effective leader. Yeah. And look what the U.S. media and the social networks are trying to do with him. Yeah. And then Biden's mental capacities are diminishing. Mm-hmm. He's very weak. I can't see him doing a debate with Trump. He'll do terrible. I mean, right. I just, so this is, for America, this presidential election is enormously important. Okay. This 2024 election. Sure. And then obviously, what is the Biden administration going to do with Israel? And I looked eye to eye. If he keeps putting pressure on Israel, it's going to get worse and worse for him. Right. There's going to be more and more catastrophes, and more consequences of our American presidents, Biden in this case, applying pressure on Israel to divide their land. That's right. So we are in for a very active 6 months. Only God knows how this is going to play out, Brandon. Yeah. But we know what to watch. But there's a lot of catalysts that can make this an even wilder, more intense, more unpredictable ride. Yeah. Wow. Well, good words, man. So with that, Bill, how do people find you if they are not aware of you and your resources? How do they find you, my friend? Thank you, Brandon. Great to be with you today. Watch.org is our website, watch.org. And also on YouTube, we have the Kingdom Come broadcast, and we're posting during the week, videos, clips, things of events that are taking place. We're, especially with breaking news. So, yeah, Kingdom Come broadcast on YouTube. Awesome. And also, we put out a weekly news report every Friday. World news is biblically relevant with a focus called Koenig's Eye View. Excellent. Well, guys, hey, look, if you want to tap into one of the greatest political minds, I think, you tap into Bill Koenig, man. He is phenomenal. And Bill, I think your magnum opus to me was that Eye to Eye book where you chronicled anytime we do something negative to Israel, it brings the cursing aspect of the Abrahamic covenant on America or whoever does that, because that's God's foreign policy. So, guys, that is a real good resource. All of his resources are great. So tap into Bill Koenig. He is the best out there, man. Bill, thank you so much, man. It's an honor to have you with us. We can't thank you enough, man. God bless you. Thank you, Brandon. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.